Last week, we released this video about tipping practices aboard cruise ships. I ended it with, okay, you heard me out, now go ahead and let me have it in the comments. And wow, you did not hold back. Within 24 hours, the video racked up over 500 comments. A few of you even joked that this could get us banned from cruise ships for good, especially after others start copying us after seeing the video. Today, I want to respond. We'll take a deeper dive into the world of cruise tipping, crew pay, and corporate accountability. Let's unpack some of the most common themes from the comments, look at the assumptions we're all making, and shed some light on why cruise tipping triggers so many strong feelings. Hey, if you are wondering exactly how to remove gratuities, head over to our website where we have a step-by-step article showing you exactly what to do. Just to be clear, we're not saying you shouldn't tip. We're saying you should tip in cash, directly to the crew who earned it. First, let's address something that came up a lot. Why we remove our automatic gratuities. We don't do it to save money. We do it because we want to know exactly where our money is going. If someone goes above and beyond during our trip, we'd rather thank them directly than leave it to a system we don't fully trust. But as expected, there's a strong divide. Some of you said removing the automatic gratuities is stiffing the invisible crew, the housekeepers, the dishwashers, the engine room staff, people you never meet but who keep the whole operation running. And listen, that's a fair concern. But it begs the question, why is tipping on a cruise ship so different than tipping on land? You wouldn't walk into the kitchen at a restaurant and tip the dishwasher. You don't think to tip the janitor who cleans the bathrooms in your office building, or search out the seamstress who sewed your shirt. Yet, on a cruise ship, we're told to consider the entire behind-the-scenes staff when we think about gratuities. Frank Mann said, "I am a very early riser, and I see all who are setting up the ship for the day's activities. It is for these people I leave my tips and then also self-tip above that." Holly Potter agreed. The dishwasher and laundry worker are just as critical as your room stewards. Your steward wouldn't be able to give you clean towels every day if someone didn't wash them. These are all kind sentiments, but it also shows just how much guilt has been built into the system. Cruise lines have effectively shifted the burden of fare pay onto us, the passengers, and then made us feel bad if we question it. Which leads to another widely shared opinion, one held by nearly everyone, regardless of their tipping stance. Cruise lines should pay their staff fairly. Hard to argue, right? But let's pause and really examine what that means. Because fair can be a slippery word depending on where you're standing. We assume cruise workers aren't paid fairly, mostly because we assume that big corporations are greedy, and sure, they are. That part checks out. But we need to challenge another assumption, that cruise employees are somehow uninformed about the deals they're accepting, that they don't understand what's fair for them, that they need us to protect them from predatory employers. That's not only patronizing, it's wrong. These aren't naive people. If you've ever haggled in a street market in Southeast Asia, you know how business savvy these folks can be. Many come from areas where economic opportunity is limited, and cruise work is seen as a path towards a better life. According to the Cruise Lines International Association, or CLIA, for every one cruise job, there are 100 applicants. Once hired, the retention rate is around 80%, an incredibly high number for hospitality work. Why is this? Because cruise jobs often include room, board, healthcare, and the chance for a person to travel and improve their language skills. These are benefits that go beyond just a paycheck. So let's ask again, what does fair look like? Cruise lines cater mostly to U.S. passengers, which makes it easy for us to project American labor standards on cruise employment. A decent hourly wage according to U.S. standards, a 40-hour work week, health benefits, maybe a 401k. And if cruise workers aren't getting that, it feels exploitative. But cruise ships hire globally. Over 75 nationalities are represented on board, with Filipinos making up about 30% of all crew members that work on cruise ships. And what's considered fair pay in the US may be wildly different in places like the Philippines, India, or Indonesia. In the Philippines, for instance, a good monthly salary is around $800, according to communityliteracy.org. That's not poverty wages. That's middle class by local standards. If a cruise employee is making more than that, plus getting housing, food, and healthcare covered, then they're arguably doing very well by their home country's standards. Is it a hard job? Of course. Long hours, months away from family, constant guest-facing performance, but many still line up for it because they see value in it. So let's take a look at what crew members actually make. Indeed.com lists 23 cruise ship jobs with salaries ranging from $23,000 to $70,000 per year. Now, before you go ahead and harangue me in the comments again, I realize that these figures reflect salaried positions and don't represent the full picture. Many cruise workers are hired on a contract basis, typically for periods ranging from 3 to 9 months. These contract workers are offered a guaranteed monthly wage, and that amount isn't universal. Based on first-hand accounts shared on crew forums and blogs, the pay varies not just by the job title, but also by the worker's nationality. Cruise lines often adjust compensation based on the standard of living in the employee's home country. As with most companies, the exact terms of these contracts are treated as proprietary information and aren't publicly disclosed. Okay, so setting aside the base wages for a moment, how much can crew members earn in tips? One commenter pointed out that this isn't difficult to estimate, and they were right. So it's time for my favorite segment. That's right, it's math time. Let's take the Star of the Seas, Royal Caribbean's newest and largest ship, set to launch in just a few weeks. I did an in-depth virtual tour of the vessel, so I'm pretty familiar with its layout and scale. At standard double occupancy, 2 people per cabin, the ship can carry 5,610 passengers. However, Royal Caribbean is a family-focused cruise line, so many cabins are designed to accommodate more guests. At full capacity, the ship can hold up to 7,600 people. Royal Caribbean currently charges $18.50 per person in automatic daily gratuities. This fee applies to all guests regardless of age. When the ship sails at double occupancy, that adds up to $103,785 in gratuities collected per day. At full occupancy, the daily total rises to $140,600. That's a significant amount of money generated through what are technically optional tips. Of course, a ship that size requires a large crew. The Star of the Seas has a crew of 2,350 on board. If, hypothetically, the gratuities were divided evenly among all crew members, yeah, I know, that isn't exactly how it works, but anyways, each person would then receive between $44 and $60 per day in tips. That comes out to an additional $1,320 to $1,800 per month. Now, keeping in mind that the average monthly income in the Philippines is around $800, it becomes easier to see why many crew members view cruise work as a valuable opportunity. Earning double that amount just in gratuities, before even factoring in wages or benefits like housing and meals, can make a contract at sea quite appealing. But here's where things get more complicated. While we passengers assume that gratuities are paid on top of a crew member's wages, there are reports, with some fairly convincing evidence, that suggest otherwise. According to these sources, gratuities may actually be deducted from the wages that the cruise line itself is responsible for paying. This practice isn't unique to the cruise industry. In many service-based jobs around the world, especially those relying heavily on tipping, employers use tips to offset payroll obligations. If this is happening on cruise ships, it changes the conversation entirely. It means that automatic gratuities aren't really supplementing the crew's income. They're subsidizing it. The amount you tip may not impact the crew's total earnings at all. It would simply reduce how much the cruise line has to pay from its own pocket. Most cruise lines remain tight-lipped about the exact structure of crew compensation. Still, the possibility that gratuities aren't truly additional earnings raises serious concerns about transparency and accountability, 2 things the cruise industry has historically lacked. Some argue that if enough passengers start removing automatic gratuities, cruise lines will simply raise their base fares to make up the difference. And while that may sound like a negative outcome, it actually points to a more honest approach, in my opinion. Ideally, the cost of a cruise should already reflect what it takes to fairly compensate the people who make the experience possible. Building wages directly into the price of the trip would shift responsibility back to the cruise line, where it belongs, rather than relying on guests to quietly subsidize payroll through a system that often lacks clarity or consistency. So, why is the system set up this way? Some people speculate that cruise lines label gratuities as tips to avoid taxes on that revenue. At first glance, that seems plausible. After all, cruise lines are known to pay as little as 2% in U.S. taxes, compared to the standard 21% corporate tax rate. U.S. tax law exempts income earned by foreign registered shipping operations, provided they're registered in a country that has reciprocal tax agreements in the U.S. But cruise companies are quick to point out that they do pay a range of taxes and fees. State income taxes where they're headquartered, sales taxes on drinks sold in U.S. waters, gambling taxes as required by law, and port fees at every stop. How gratuities are classified doesn't significantly impact any of these tax obligations. But does classifying wages as tips work as an advantage for the crew? Well, for a U.S. citizen, yes. Under the recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill, tips are now tax exempt for Americans. But for most foreign crew members, all wages are already tax exempt in their home country under what's known as the Seafarer's Law. So, does labeling income as tips really provide a tax break for the cruise line or the crew? Not really. But is there a psychological advantage? Absolutely. As one commenter noted, it's pretty clear that automatic tips these days are just another part of the base fare. Carving them out as a separate voluntary charge enables the cruise line to advertise lower cabin rates. This is a common pricing scam in the corporate world. Chop the total price up into several pieces, and it becomes harder for customers to recognize exactly how much they are being charged. By carving tips out as a separate line item, cruise companies shift the emotional burden to you, the passenger. Instead of a personal gesture of appreciation, tipping becomes a moral obligation to ensure that the hardworking crew is being paid fairly. That's why tipping on a cruise is such a lightning rod issue. It touches on something deeply human: fairness, gratitude, and the stories we tell ourselves about helping others. What last week's response showed us is this: people care. They care about doing right by the crew, by their fellow travelers, and by their own sense of integrity. Yes, cruise work is tough. Yes, tipping makes a real difference. But no, we shouldn't blindly follow a system just because someone else has told us it's the right thing to do. If you're wondering how to remove gratuities, we've got a step-by-step guide on our website. But more importantly, we encourage you to think critically before you tip or don't. And remember, whether you leave your automatic gratuities on or give every crew member their own portrait of Andrew Jackson, adventure awaits.